Your memories aren't lessons, they're shackles. You kneel to yesterday, mistake loyalty for virtue, and wonder why weaker men keep selecting you for slaughter. Memory is not a library, it is a leash, and you have been dragging it behind you, mistaking weight for depth, scars for credentials, and recall for control. You were taught that memory makes you wiser, that remembering pain prevents repetition, that honoring the past builds character. That narrative was not designed for rulers, it was designed for management. Memory is how power keeps you facing backward while the world repositions around you. Every time you hesitate, it's memory. Every time you over-explain, it's memory. Every time you delay a clean decision because of how something felt before, that is not caution, it is capture. Power lives forward, memory pulls backward. You cannot do both. The moment you replay an old failure, you are no longer assessing the current battlefield. You are negotiating with a ghost, and ghosts don't bleed when you strike them, but you do when you miss the living threat in front of you. Memory chains power in 3 ways. First, it creates false continuity. You believe yesterday's rules still apply today. You assume people remain what they were. You treat loyalty as fixed, motives as stable, roles as permanent. That assumption is fatal. Power flows to those who update fast. Memory slows updates. It whispers, "This is how it's always been." That sentence has buried more men than bullets. Second, memory manufactures identity debt. You start protecting who you were instead of positioning who you must become. You defend old choices, old alliances, old self-images. You hesitate to act decisively because it would contradict your past. This is how men become predictable, and predictability is blood in the water. Third, memory breeds moral drag. You remember kindness, favors, shared struggle. You feel obligation where only position should exist. You call it honor. Predators call it leverage. Memory doesn't make you noble, it makes you negotiable. Understand this clearly. Power does not respect memory, it exploits it. Institutions use memory to pacify. Relationships use memory to bind. Enemies use memory to delay your strike. Even your own mind uses memory to keep you consistent because consistency feels safe. Safety is not survival. Safety is stasis, and stasis is decay. You are not losing because you lack intelligence. You are losing because you keep consulting yesterday before acting today. The past is not advisory, it is parasitic. Strategists do not erase memory, they demote it. Memory becomes a data point, not a directive, a report, not a commander. The weak let memory vote, the strong let it observe. This chapter shifts your lens from remembrance to position, from narrative to leverage, from who you were to where you stand. If you feel resistance right now, that's the chain tightening. That's the old identity fighting to stay relevant. It wants continuity. Power demands rupture. The present moment is the only arena where force can be applied. Memory has no hands. It cannot strike. It can only delay your strike while others move. The first act of sovereignty is not confidence. It is amnesia, selective, surgical, intentional. And that terrifies men who survive on stories instead of outcomes. Because once you stop remembering who you were, nothing binds who you can become. Memory does not sit quietly in the mind. It issues orders, and most men obey without realizing who gave the command. You think you decide. You don't. You react. Reaction is memory disguised as instinct. The brain is efficient, not loyal. It prefers shortcuts over accuracy. When a situation feels familiar, it doesn't analyze, it retrieves. Past emotion becomes present instruction. Fear, pride, shame, hope, Each stored moment waits like a trigger. Pull the right stimulus and the response fires automatically. That is how memory hijacks command. You believe you're weighing options. In reality, your nervous system is protecting itself from re-experiencing pain. Avoidance masquerades as strategy. Hesitation pretends to be intelligence. You call it being careful. It's not care, it's conditioning. The strongest lever memory uses is emotional tagging. Events are not stored as facts, they're stored as feelings with footnotes. A betrayal isn't remembered as what happened, it's remembered as how it felt. A win isn't recalled as positioning, it's recalled as validation. So when a similar pattern appears, your body responds before your mind arrives. Pulse rises, jaw tightens, words change, decisions shrink. That micro-delay is all a sharper operator needs. This is why experienced men still lose. Experience without control is just a longer leash. Memory also creates false urgency. Past loss screams, "Don't let this happen again." Past praise whispers, "Do what worked before." Both are traps. The first makes you defensive, the second makes you repetitive. Defense and repetition are visible. Visibility invites attack. Command requires silence inside the mind. Memory is noise. Notice how easily you're pulled off position by recall. One comment reminds you of an old disrespect. One situation echoes a previous failure. Suddenly, you're no longer responding to what is, you're correcting what was. That's not dominance, that's time travel, and time travel always costs power. There is another layer, identity memory. You remember who you think you are, the reliable one, the loyal one, the rational one, the dangerous one. So when reality demands deviation, you resist. You choose coherence over effectiveness. You act in character instead of in advantage. This is how identity becomes a cage built from compliments and wounds. Predators understand this. They don't fight your strength, they activate your memory. They bring up old stories, old favors, old conflicts, old labels, anything that pulls you out of the present and into explanation mode. Once you're explaining, you're already subordinate. Power does not explain, it moves. Memory also delays exits. You stay too long because of history. You forgive too often because of shared past. You hesitate to cut because of what was built. Sunk cost is not an economic error, it's a psychological chain. Command means deciding without emotional referendum. Memory demands a vote. It wants to be heard, honored, integrated. That's fine for civilians, it's lethal for strategists. This chapter is not about erasing memory, it's about stripping it of authority. Memory becomes a file you open deliberately, not a reflex that opens you. When command is hijacked, it feels like confusion. When command is reclaimed, it feels like cold clarity. That coldness isn't cruelty, it's accuracy. And accuracy is what separates operators from casualties.
There are two visible species in every hierarchy, those who remember and those who watch the rememberers. The first group lives inside narrative. The second lives inside position. Rememberers speak in timelines. They reference history, context, shared struggle, how things used to be. Their decisions are justified by continuity. They value consistency because consistency protects identity. They are emotionally legible, and legibility is exposure. Predators don't need strength, they need clarity, and memory makes you transparent. The rememberer signals weakness long before he's challenged. He overqualifies his actions. He explains motives. He revisits old agreements. He hesitates to violate precedent. He carries emotional artifacts into new encounters, unaware they broadcast exactly where he can be pressured. Watch how he behaves under tension. He recalls instead of assesses. He justifies instead of moves. He negotiates instead of terminates. That pattern is not accidental, it's conditioning. Predators study this. They catalog emotional residues the way surgeons map arteries. They learn what you won't let go of: old pride, old guilt, old loyalty, old wounds. Each one becomes a handle. A predator never attacks your logic. He activates your memory and lets you sabotage yourself. He brings up everything we've been through. He references past sacrifices. He reminds you of who you used to be. Now you're off balance. You're no longer calculating outcome. You're protecting narrative. You want to remain the man you remember yourself as. That desire slows your blade. Predators don't live in memory. They live in recalibration. They drop alliances without mourning. They revise self-image without apology. They do not need to feel consistent to feel sovereign. This is why they appear cold or unfair. In reality, they're simply unburdened. They carry no emotional inventory into new engagements. Every interaction is assessed on present leverage only. Look at the rememberer in conflict. He says, "After all I did." He says, "You know I wouldn't." He says, "This isn't who I am." Those statements are confessions. They announce constraint. They reveal boundaries the predator will exploit. Now look at the predator. He says very little. He asks questions. He allows silence. Silence is not absence. It's pressure without commitment. The rememberer fills that silence with history. The predator fills it with calculation. This asymmetry is decisive. The rememberer believes depth comes from past investment. The predator knows depth from future control. One looks backward for meaning. The other looks forward for advantage. This isn't about morality. It's about selection. Hierarchies do not elevate the most loyal. They elevate the most adaptable. Memory reduces adaptability by anchoring behavior to previous states. Predators cut anchor lines instinctively. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The moment you become emotionally attached to your own past, you become predictable. And predictability is the only thing predators need. This chapter forces recognition, not condemnation, recognition. You are either leaking memory into the room, or you are reading others while remaining unreadable. One is prey behavior. The other is command posture. You cannot be both. The shift begins when you stop asking, "What does this mean based on the past?" and start asking, "What does this change right now?" That question has no memory in it, only position. And position is where power waits. History is not a teacher, it is a filter, and it filters out men who remember too much. Look closely, not at the stories you were sold, but at the outcomes that survived. Power does not accumulate around those who honor the past. It concentrates around those willing to violate it. Every dominant force in history advanced by discarding yesterday the moment it became inconvenient. Empires didn't fall because they forgot who they were. They fell because they refused to forget. Tradition hardened into doctrine. Doctrine calcified into identity. Identity replaced assessment. And while they protected memory, someone else rewrote the map. This is not philosophical, it is mechanical. Memory creates delay. Delay creates vulnerability. Vulnerability invites replacement. The men who rise during chaos are not the most experienced, they are the least attached. They adapt faster because they are not busy grieving obsolete rules. They don't argue with reality, they overwrite it. History pretends to reward virtue. In reality, it rewards speed of abandonment. Every collapsed hierarchy shows the same pattern: leaders referencing legacy while rivals exploit new conditions. Generals fighting the last war. Institutions defending values while losing territory. Men clinging to identity while being bypassed. Memory turns strength into ceremony. Human nature follows the same law.
Individuals who survive extreme shifts are not those who stay true to themselves. They are those who shed selves efficiently. They do not ask permission from their past before acting. They do not negotiate with previous versions of themselves. This is why nostalgia is dangerous. It frames decay as dignity. You look back and see meaning. Power looks back and sees friction. History is filled with competent men rendered irrelevant because they couldn't release what once worked. Their memory became a fossil record, impressive, immobile, and ignored by the living. Meanwhile, the so-called ruthless rise not because they are cruel, but because they are unburdened. They do not carry emotional artifacts into new eras. They don't defend old victories. They extract what's useful and discard the rest. This pattern repeats because it must. Power operates under selection pressure. Memory resists selection by preserving outdated traits. Nature does not reward remembrance, it rewards responsiveness. You were taught that forgetting is disrespect. That's a moral story designed to keep systems stable. Stability benefits those already positioned. When the environment shifts, stability becomes suicide. History doesn't punish amnesia, it selects for it. The past has no authority, only inertia. When conditions change, loyalty to memory becomes treason against survival. That's why revolutions are led by men with little attachment to the old order. They have nothing to protect and everything to claim. This chapter is not telling you to deny history, it's telling you to downgrade it. History is reference material, not command structure. The moment you consult it for permission, you fall behind those who consult only conditions. Power respects one thing: relevance. And relevance belongs to those who can look at a dead system, a dead identity, a dead relationship, and walk away without ceremony. No speeches, no closure, no honoring the past, just movement. That is why history appears brutal. It is not cruel, it is efficient. And efficiency has no memory.
You do not break memory by thinking harder. You break it by changing behavior. Power is not reclaimed through insight. Insight is passive. Power returns the moment you stop consulting the past before acting. This chapter is not philosophy, it is surgery. The chain is severed through 3 strategic shifts. First, compression of time. You collapse decision-making into the present. No emotional archaeology, no revisiting how something used to feel. You ask one question only: what position improves my leverage right now? Anything that doesn't answer that is noise. This feels ruthless because it removes internal debate. Debate is memory arguing with necessity. Command does not debate, it executes. Second, emotional sterilization. You stop feeding feelings with interpretation. Events are treated as data, not stories. Betrayal becomes information. Loss becomes signal. Praise becomes irrelevant. The less emotion you extract from events, the less memory can anchor itself. This is why predators appear calm under pressure. They are not braver, they are emptier. Nothing inside them is reacting. They have already detached meaning from experience. Third, preemptive exits. You leave before memory demands justification. You end alliances before history is used as leverage. You cut positions while you still feel something. Once emotion is gone, power has already shifted away from you. This is the hardest move. The mind screams for closure, fairness, explanation. That scream is the chain tightening. Strategic exits feel premature to the sentimental and overdue to the dominant. Understand this: you don't wait until something is broken to leave. You leave when its cost begins rising. Memory lies by saying endurance equals strength. Endurance without leverage is just slow erosion. This behavior shift will make you uncomfortable, not because it's wrong, but because your old identity was built around being consistent, reliable, remembered. Severing the chain feels like betrayal of self. Good. That self was optimized for a past environment that no longer exists. You must train yourself to act before memory intervenes. When an instinct to explain arises, stop. When nostalgia surfaces, move. When guilt appears, cut faster. These emotions are not signals of truth, they are withdrawal symptoms. Silence your internal historian, promote your internal tactician. Over time, something changes. The world stops pulling you backward. Interactions become lighter, decisions faster. Others begin adjusting to you instead of the reverse. You become difficult to pin, difficult to predict, difficult to exploit. That is not chaos, that is sovereignty. The chain is not removed all at once. It is weakened through repetition. Every present-focused decision erodes memory's authority. Eventually, memory stops interrupting. It becomes inert. At that point, you don't feel powerful. You feel unavailable. And unavailable men are rarely controlled. Memory doesn't just store events. It preserves a version of you that is no longer viable. That version is polite, coherent, consistent, and obsolete. Identity is the final chain because it feels personal. You don't just remember what happened, you remember who you were when it happened. That self becomes sacred, protected, defended, and quietly weaponized against you. You say, "That's not who I am." Power hears, "That's what he won't do." An identity built from memory demands continuity. It resists contradiction. It punishes deviation with shame. Every time you consider acting differently, the old self rises up and says, "If you do that, you're not you anymore." Correct. That's the point. Power does not reward authenticity. It rewards adaptation. Identity is useful only as long as it serves position. The moment it costs leverage, it must be terminated. This is not self-improvement, it is self-erasure. The old identity was shaped by environments that no longer exist: teachers, parents, early rivals, first losses, first wins. It learned rules that once protected you. Now it enforces limits. What kept you safe is now keeping you small. Killing the old identity feels like disloyalty because it was built from memory. It remembers promises, roles, expectations. It wants to be recognized. It wants credit for surviving. Power does not grant pensions to former selves. The replacement identity is not a better you. It is a quieter one. Less narrative, less explanation, less emotional footprint. You stop describing yourself. You stop defending your character. You stop reacting to accusations that only apply to a version of you that no longer exists. Silence becomes insulation. This is where most men fail, not because they can't act strategically, but because they can't let go of being seen a certain way. Reputation becomes the last emotional addiction. Predators don't care how they're perceived, they care how others adjust. When perception shifts, they shift with it. No grief, no justification. Identity death is not dramatic, it's procedural. You stop answering questions you don't owe. You stop correcting misunderstandings that don't threaten position. You stop carrying emotional residue from interactions that are already over. Memory weakens when identity dissolves. Without a you to anchor to, the past loses its grip. Events stop meaning anything about who you are. They simply happened, and now they're done. This is the point of no return. Once the old identity is dead, you are no longer predictable. Old levers stop working. Guilt loses traction. Nostalgia falls silent. People sense the absence and mislabel it as coldness, arrogance, or danger. Let them. Labels are how others try to rebuild a version of you they can understand. Refuse reconstruction. What replaces the old identity is not emptiness, it's position. You define yourself only by where you stand, not who you were. That makes you difficult to trap, difficult to shame, difficult to exploit. Memory can't chain what it can't recognize, and once the past can't find you, it can no longer command you.
This is where men relapse, not because they didn't understand, but because forgetting requires maintenance. Memory waits, patient. It doesn't attack, it returns, in quiet moments, in moments of loss, in moments of praise. It tries to rebuild the old chain, one emotion at a time. This is the final warning. Power does not remember who you were. The world does not reward your growth. It tests whether it can still pull you backward. The moment you re-explain yourself, you've reopened the archive. The moment you reminisce, you've given memory a vote. The moment you seek validation for who you've become, you've already stepped off position. There is no finish line. There is only vigilance. Most men fail here because they want resolution, closure, recognition. They want the past to agree with who they are now. That never happens. The past only tightens or loosens. It never blesses. Elites understand this. They don't seek peace with memory. They starve it. They do not revisit old identities. They do not correct outdated narratives. They do not clarify misunderstood transitions. They let confusion stand. Confusion in others creates space. Space creates leverage. This is why power appears lonely. It's not isolation, it's separation. You have stepped outside the emotional economy. You no longer trade in stories. You trade in outcomes. Here is the dividing line. On one side are men who want to be understood. On the other are men who want to be effective. You cannot cross back and forth without cost. This chapter does not ask for belief, it issues a selection notice. If you continue to consult memory for permission, you will be managed by those who don't. If you continue to anchor identity to the past, you will be predicted by those who don't need one. Power is not cruel, it is uninterested. Uninterested in your story, uninterested in your intentions, uninterested in who you used to be. It responds only to position, timing, and force. So here is the final instruction. Do not remember forward. Do not carry history into the present. Do not negotiate with the version of you that survived yesterday. Let the past go dark. If you feel discomfort reading this, good. That means the chain is loosening. Most will retreat here. They will soften the message, dilute it, repackage it as balance. They will be selected accordingly. Power belongs to those who can walk away from their own story without looking back. No ceremony, no audience, no memory. Only movement.